Chapter 3. The quietest sandwich in London. There are many kinds of silence. There is peaceful silence, awkward silence, the silence of two strangers trapped in a lift pretending not to smell something. And then there was the silence of Nigel Pendergrass eating his sandwich. To the untrained ear, it sounded like nothing at all. To the trained ear, it also sounded like nothing at all. Because Nigel's lunchtime ritual was so quiet, so gentle, so aggressively unobtrusive that even sound waves refused to acknowledge his existence. At precisely 12:58 p.m., Nigel tiptoed toward the communal kitchen, clutching his Tupperware. Inside it lay his signature creation, a sandwich so plain it had been legally classified as beige. 2 slices of white bread, 1 thin smear of margarine, applied with the caution of someone defusing a bomb, 1 leaf of limp lettuce, a single slice of ham that looked as though it had been bullied into thinness. Voice 1. Nice, Nigel, I don't need flavor. I need quiet. He reached the kitchen only to find it occupied by 3 co-workers, all aggressively microwaving soup. This was a problem. Microwave soup eaters were loud. The slurping, the lid peeling, the triumphant ding of, I have heated nourishment and you have not. Nigel required solitude. Voice 1. Nice, Nigel, I can't possibly disturb them by taking up counter space. Or existing in the same room. That would be selfish. He backed out of the kitchen like a Victorian ghost ashamed of haunting the wrong house. Plan B, the stairwell. It was quiet, mostly empty, and acoustically perfect for secretive chewing. Nigel lowered himself onto the bottom step, opened his lunchbox, and gently lifted the sandwich as though performing CPR on the world's blandest patient. Then he began. If eating could be described as tiptoeing, Nigel was tiptoeing with his teeth. Each bite was a carefully choreographed ballet of anti-noise. He chewed with the soft determination of a man trying not to wake a sleeping dragon. He swallowed as silently as a cloud moving behind another cloud. This was normal for him. What was not normal was the sudden appearance of co-worker Sarah Riddington, who burst into the stairwell like human confetti. Oh my God, Nigel! Nigel froze mid-chew. Voice 1. Nice. Nigel. Oh no. Oh dear. Oh no again. Sarah clapped her hands to her chest. You're fasting, Nigel blinked. I'm what? You're fasting, she repeated, with the solemnity of someone announcing the discovery of a new planet. For charity. For awareness. For something noble, I assume. Nigel attempted to speak, but the half-chewed microbite of sandwich in his mouth threatened to make noise. He could not risk it. Humiliation by audible chewing was unacceptable. Sarah gasped. You can't even talk. You're that committed. Nigel shook his head, waving his sandwich feebly. Sarah wiped away a tear. You're incredible. Office chatter spreads faster than airborne viruses, and by the time Nigel swallowed his silent bite, the rumor had already evolved into legend. He re-entered the office to find a small gathering of co-workers watching him the way villagers watch a monk levitate. Stay strong, mate, someone whispered reverently. Your discipline is inspiring, said another. Terence himself emerged from his office, frowning in confusion. Why does everyone suddenly respect Nigel? What's he done? Fasting, Sarah breathed. For charity. Terence's eyebrows rose so sharply they nearly vacated his face. Charity? What sort of charity? Sarah hadn't thought that far. She turned to Nigel. Nigel, what is the cause you're fasting for? He should have corrected them. He should have told the truth. He should have explained the sandwich, the stairwell, the art of silent consumption. Instead, he made a noise like a startled pigeon. Muh, beautiful, Sarah whispered. He refuses to even boast about it. Terence folded his arms. Well, keep it up. Browning and Amp. Commerçant supports charitable spirit. Nigel wanted to scream into the nearest filing cabinet, but the concept of screaming was far too rude. Instead, he squeaked. Voice 1. Nice. Nigel, how do I explain that I am not noble? I am simply a man trying not to chew loudly near other humans. At 3:00 p.m., the office admin, Gina, approached him carrying a plastic tub. We've started a collection. she said warmly. For your cause. Nigel stared at the tub. Coins clinked inside it like a guilt orchestra. All we need, she continued, is the name of the charity you're supporting so we can label the box. Nigel panicked. His brain, normally a quiet place filled with worry and beige thoughts, suddenly fired up like a panicked badger trying to operate machinery. Voice 2, Mr. Unhinged, say something bold. Say something grand. Say something that makes you sound like a legend among mortals. Voice 1, nice Nigel, no, don't listen to that. That voice is dangerous. But the two voices collided like shopping trolleys in a Tesco car park, and Nigel said the worst possible thing. He whispered, "Hungry hearts." Gina gasped. "You're raising money to feed the hungry?" Nigel silently wished the carpet would swallow him whole. "Right then," she said brightly. "I'll make posters." By 3:30, 5 posters were printed, laminated, and strategically placed by the elevator, the kitchen, and the photocopier. By 3:45, a senior manager approached Nigel and shook his hand vigorously. "I admire your selflessness," he said. "Starving yourself for strangers? Admirable. Absolutely admirable." Nigel was dizzy from shame. Voice 1, nice Nigel, I must confess. I must tell the truth. Voice 2, Mr. Unhinged, no, lean into it. Become a symbol. Become the quiet martyr they deserve. Nigel ignored the second voice, mostly because he wasn't yet sure the voice wasn't caused by dehydration or emotional collapse. But the situation spiraled. At 4:10 p.m., an email from HR arrived. Subject line, congratulations to Nigel Pendergrass, our company humanitarian of the month. Humanitarian of the month. For eating a sandwich so quietly it looked like he hadn't eaten at all. At 4:45, Sarah approached again. "We're organizing a silent vigil in your honor," she whispered. "Just 15 minutes of quiet reflection. You don't have to attend. We know you must conserve your strength." Nigel stared at her. Voice 1, nice Nigel, this has gotten out of hand. Voice 2, Mr. Unhinged, perhaps not. Nigel's cheeks burned with embarrassment. He opened his mouth to confess. But then Terrence called across the room, "Nigel! Excellent work today! And for what it's worth, I'm proud of you." Proud of Nigel. For the first time in years, he stood there, stunned, conflicted, two voices tugging at the edges of his mind like intoxicated tug-of-war participants. Voice 1, nice Nigel, tell them the truth. Voice 2, Mr. Unhinged or don't. Nigel cleared his throat. Everyone watched him. He held up his hand. He began. And then, in an act of kindness toward himself, or cowardice, depending on the angle, Nigel sat down quietly and said nothing at all. The office sighed in admiration. The legend of Hungry Hearts grew. And somewhere deep inside him, something stirred. Something bold. Something loud. Something dangerously ready to be born. He didn't know it yet, but today was the last quiet lunch Nigel Pendergrass would ever have. His world was about to get very noisy indeed. Chapter 4. Bee and the Lamppost. By the next morning, Nigel Pendergrass had convinced himself that yesterday's humanitarian fiasco was behind him. He would arrive at work early. He would blend in. He would avoid stairwells, sandwiches, charity vigils, and anything else with a pulse. More importantly, he would avoid Bee Weller. Bee, with her bright eyes and sarcastic charm. Bee, who laughed like she wasn't performing for anyone. Bee, who once said, "Morning, Nigel," and accidentally provided him with enough emotional fuel to survive a whole month. Avoiding Bee was the safest choice. Unfortunately, fate had other ideas, and fate, in London, often takes the form of a badly positioned lamppost. Nigel stepped out of the tube station into the morning drizzle that London deploys to remind citizens they are insignificant specks on a very wet planet. He tightened his coat, lowered his head, and briskly walked toward Browning and Amp. Company, rehearsing a speech in his mind. Voice 1. Nice Nigel, if I see B, I shall nod politely. Not wave. Waves are needy. A nod, though. Distant, respectful, emotionally unsuspicious. Yes. A perfect nod. He rehearsed the nod as he walked. He tilted his head slightly to the left. Too arrogant. He tilted to the right. Too submissive. Straight ahead. Too robotic. He tried a micro-tilt. Too French. Voice 1. Nice, Nigel. I will never successfully nod at another human being. He was so lost in thought that he did not see the lamppost. The lamppost, however, saw him. With the cold, unyielding certainty of a law of physics, Nigel walked directly into it. His forehead struck the metal pole with a sound that could best be described as an ambitious coconut attempting to headbutt a submarine. The vibration traveled through his skull, down his spine, and into the deepest regions of his pride, which immediately withered into dust. Nigel staggered back, clutching his head. And then, because Nigel Pendergrass was who he was, he apologized. "Oh, I'm terribly sorry," he whispered to the lamppost. "I didn't mean to invade your space. Entirely my fault. Please continue being upright." It was at this precise moment, this pinnacle of public humiliation, that a voice behind him said, "Nigel." He froze. The gods of timing had once again decided to ruin his life for sport. He turned slowly, eyes watering from the impact, dignity leaking out of him like a punctured bouncy castle. Bea Weller stood a few feet away, clutching her coffee, eyebrows raised in that iconic mixture of amusement and pity. "Oh no," Nigel breathed, but unfortunately out loud. Bea approached, trying and failing not to smile. "Did you just apologize to a lamppost?" "It was a misunderstanding," Nigel mumbled. Her lips twitched. "Between you and the lamppost?" "Yes, well, I suppose so." She let out a laugh that was not cruel but also not gentle. It was the laugh of someone witnessing an event that would be retold for years. "I'm sorry," she said, still smiling. "I'm not laughing at you. It's just, of all the people to say sorry to this week, the lamppost is new." Nigel nodded, wishing the ground would swallow him with a polite slurp. Voice 1. "Nice, Nigel. This is the end. I must move to a new city, a new country, a new planet where lampposts cannot speak of me." Bea stepped closer. "Are you okay?" "Yes. Perfectly fine. Never been finer. Quite robust, actually. My skull is particularly sturdy this morning." "Right," Bea said, concerned. Nigel's brain, already compromised from blunt metal trauma, decided now was the perfect moment to malfunction. He attempted to smile, but it came out as a grimace that suggested internal organ failure. Bea blinked. "You sure you're all right?" "I'm excellent," Nigel said, voice cracking like an unreliable radio. "Just rehearsing a new headbutting technique." Bea laughed again. "You're funny, Nigel. Funny." The word echoed through him like a sacred chant. She thought he was funny. Voice 1. "Nice, Nigel. She thinks I'm funny. This is new. This is wildly dangerous." Nigel's emotional stability, already fragile, like a papier-mâché canoe in heavy rain, finally collapsed. He felt heat in his cheeks, sweat on his palms, and panic in his soul. His heart thudded like it was trying to run ahead of him and escape the moment. He said the worst possible thing. "Would you like to get coffee? I mean, of course you already have coffee. But a theoretical coffee? Conceptual coffee? Not actual coffee with drinking. Just the idea. Abstractly." Bea stared. Then she smiled in a way that made his internal organs swirl like a smoothie. "I'd like that," she said kindly. "But maybe later, after your head recovers." Nigel nodded so violently that he nearly headbutted the lamppost again. "Right! Yes! Later, when I'm conscious." "Good," Bea said, backing away slowly, as one does when dealing with startled woodland creatures or over-caffeinated squirrels. "See you inside." Nigel watched her leave. Then he turned back to the lamppost and whispered, Thank you for your patience during this difficult time. Voice 2. Mr. Unhinged, you absolute disaster. Nigel jolted. The voice again, sarcastic, unimpressed, and deeply unlike him. Voice 2. Mr. Unhinged, no more apologizing to street furniture. You're embarrassing both of us. He shook his head violently, dismissing the hallucination and the shame and the entire collapse of the last 3 minutes. He straightened his coat. He inhaled deeply. And then he walked directly into the office door because it was glass, and he thought it was open. B, who was still in the lobby, witnessed that too. Her coffee splashed. Nigel's dignity evaporated. Voice 2. Mr. Unhinged, you need help. And Nigel, for once, couldn't disagree. He pressed his palm to the glass, face flattened against it, wondering how a man could be so catastrophically unprepared for existence. Then, in the faint reflection of the glass, he saw something strange in his own eyes. A spark, a glimmer, a hint. The first simmer of the creature that would soon take over his life. The early whisper of the personality that would roast bosses, terrify corgis, and drag him kicking and screaming out of his beige existence. But for now, Nigel simply peeled himself off the door and muttered, "I'm sorry," to the door, to B, to himself, to the universe. He had no idea that his days of apologizing were about to end. Violently.